This is, pardon me, this is Let's Talk, getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. This on-air community forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492 or tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR. Are we doing tweets today?
Oh, no. No, we'll just do the phones, I think, because, that's what the show is all about. And joined that was the breath and voice of Charles Schultz. He took a very deep breath before the show began, which is a good sign. Stephen Hurwitz is here. Shelley Rugg is unable to join us. She's laid up with some kind of infectious disease. So
Hi, I'm Shelley Rugg.
She was kind enough not to come into the collective studio.
Before we begin, I just want to comment that if we approach everything without judgment, then this must be a judgment-free zone. And Charles, I think you're going to have to leave.
You mean you're judging me in the judgment-free zone? You've judged me to be inappropriate for the judgment-free zone. Is that what I'm hearing?
You're right.
Boys. Shelley, quick, come join us. Calm these boys down.
Actually, Stephen has made a good point, which is that this idea of being free of judgment is patently absurd. And whoever said you could be free of judgment deserves to be judged harshly by me.
So when you call in to be judged and hear the phone ringing, please hang on. When you hear me say you're on the air, give us your first name, turn down your radio, and please keep the language clean.
Do you think that's why Mia just turned us down out there? Is she's going to call in? Is that anyway?
415-663-8492.
But what are we talking about?
Well, let me just tell you. Allow me to tell you. Today marked the latest, how am I to say this? The Doomsday Clock. If you've heard of the Doomsday Clock, it was created by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. Their committee that researches security, and they have decided. Last year, they turned the clock to 2.5 minutes to midnight, which was unusual. They don't usually do it in 30-second increments. They usually do it in 1-minute increments. But last year, I think it was precipitated by the election of our president, and they thought that was a dangerous thing. And apparently they think it's even more dangerous now because they've moved it. This is 2018. They've moved the Doomsday Clock to 2 minutes to midnight, which is the closest it's been to midnight since 1953, which is when, let's see, they started it in 1947 with 7 minutes to midnight. And the idea was, is to create not just knowledge of the state of affairs, but to start conversations and to spur people into conversation and into thoughts of what we might do about the impending doom. And it started out, as they are the atomic scientists, they were concerned about the nuclear dangers to the world, to humanity, and to the world itself. So these were people who were involved in the Manhattan Project and were suitably shocked by the things they had wrought and had witnessed. So it's gone from 7 minutes to midnight. In 1953, it was 2 minutes to midnight after the U.S. decides to pursue the hydrogen bomb, a weapon far more powerful than any atomic bomb. And they did their first tests on a thermonuclear device, obliterating a Pacific Ocean islet in the process. And 9 months later, the Soviets tested an H-bomb of their own. So that was basically the beginning of the arms race, or certainly a dangerous point in the arms race. And from there on out, it went into the Cold War. It vacillated from 7 minutes to midnight. Midnight meaning, of course, obliteration, the end of the world, basically, or the end of humanity, let's put it that way. After a decade of almost non-stop nuclear tests, the U.S. and Soviet Union signed the Partial Test Ban Treaty in 1963, so it went to 12 minutes. And 7 minutes again. So, and we're back to Cold War levels. Let's put it that way.
I want to ask you a question. I don't know how old Steve is, but
Stephen. I don't know how old Steve is, but I have an age.
Stephen has an age, which maybe he'd like to reveal. Also, his unnecessary fussiness about what he's called.
Okay, Charlie.
Well, the impertinence is outrageous. Do you? I mean, when I use the phrase nuclear paranoia, or talk about the atmosphere of doing nuclear drills, preparedness drills. Do either of you remember this growing up?
People talk about this duck and cover thing where the kids were taught when the sirens go off to get under their desks.
We did it for tornadoes in the Midwest.
Yeah.
We did those duck and cover for a tornado.
Probably a wise thing.
Yes.
We judged how much fear we should have by how many politicians said nuclear instead of nuclear.
Well, that's our former president, George W. Bush. Yes, it was a nuclear man.
Well, let me just say that in England we did not have nuclear drills.
Okay.
Even though we would be right there in the firing line, that we would have been sort of on the edge of ground zero, which would have been Europe.
Well, that's what these Britons think. They think they're so important.
No, we didn't do that. Well, I did live in Hawaii for a stretch back in the 80s, and they used to have the warning sirens would go off every week, I think. Every week or every month.
Well, don't you think it's absurd?
And they're doing it again now.
Well,
as we know, they had a false alarm, which was a little frightening for everybody.
If any listener does have some memory of this kind of like nuclear preparedness drill that they did in the school, if you can speak to remembering what nuclear paranoia was like at the height of the Cold War, please call 415-663-8492.
Have you spent any time in a bunker, in a fallout shelter?
Well, that was very big, and especially in Southern California, people building bunkers.
Oh, in New York City. There were hundreds of them in New York City.
Interesting, yeah.
In Ohio, we never thought we would be at risk.
Nobody would bomb Ohio. It's, what's the point?
No, I think the whole thing's absurd. So you're going to get in your bunker and you're safe, so you're going to come out of your bunker and everything's going to be gone.
Yeah, it'll be like the Twilight Zone.
Or, oh my God, we better be afraid. H-bombs are on our way. It's too late to worry about it.
Once they start flying. Well, that was the point of this, though. This is the point: is to make the public aware of the dangers created by the very people who started the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, to make people aware, get public awareness going, and to fuel the demand for non-proliferation treaties and talks on nuclear arms and reducing the arms.
It's turned out, though, that the big danger has been the waste from all these bombs. They haven't known what to do with them. They dumped some out, I think, at the Farallon Islands, didn't they?
From the bomb testing, or from nuclear power? Was it nuclear?
I thought it was the material from testing, because Treasure Island is radioactive. Hunters Point, Bayview, right where they decommissioned all these ships that they did the nuclear tests on and things like that. They pulled them apart. There's a huge radioactivity there. And then I did hear about that, which is always shocking, because as a privileged American, you always think the world is a nicer place than it actually is. And so, yeah, they put all of this nuclear waste, and I don't know if it was from a nuclear power plant or if it was from all of these tests that they were doing on, detonating nuclear weapons, but they put them in barrels and sunk them down to the Farallones.
Yeah.
And they're still there.
Steel barrels.
Yeah, exactly. They're never going to rust.
Water.
And in the ocean, there's no problem at all.
So they aren't still there.
Yeah, they are still there.
Oh, they're still there.
Yeah.
And also Britain, of course, dumped metal barrels in the Channel, in the English Channel, and in the Irish Sea.
And so on the Irish.
It's sort of ringed by radioactive waters now.
I think the thing is, it's so terrifying, right? I mean, not just the power of nuclear weapons, but just any part of this. And Jim and Mary Beth, if you're out there, you should be calling in.
Yeah, give us a call.
Exactly.
415-663-8492 or 8317.
Because, what do you do with this waste, right? I mean, there's at the Hanford nuclear site, not the Hanford nuclear milk site in Central California, but up in
Washington.
They have all of these problems with storage of all of this radioactive material.
Yeah.
So what do you do with it? So you take it up from the Farallones. Well, where do you put it now?
They haven't decided, actually, so it's just they're just hanging on to it.
Well, I mean, what do you do?
It's controversial.
The thing is, I don't think there's anything to do with it. I mean,
they want a big cave. They're going to put it in this cave.
Yucca Mountain in Nevada. But they've effectively resisted that. And actually, Alvin Duskin, if you're listening, call in, because that was a part of how they were able to block the nuclear plant in Bodega Head way back when was getting into that issue of waste disposal. What are you going to do with this stuff?
Just the transportation might be the most dangerous part, getting it from point A to point B.
Sure, and Fukushima is still going on.
Fukushima is still dumping radioactive water into the Pacific.
Have some lovely sashimi this afternoon, listeners.
Yes. And the one that was the power plant that was shut down on the California coast, so there's only one left now.
Diablo Canyon and San Onofre, both closed.
Still, all the waste is still sitting there, right there, just above the waterline.
So bring us back to the Doomsday Clock with all of this, Paul Raffaele. And do call us, 663-8492. We want to hear your opinion. Well, those two do.
Yeah. The Doomsday Clock. So what's happening now, though, in more modern times, it's not just the nuclear threat. It is that, of course, because, again, it's ramping up again. So here's a rundown of why they chose to move the minute hand closer to midnight this very morning at 7 a.m., this very morning. In 2017, world leaders failed to respond effectively to the looming threats of nuclear war and climate change. So now they're taking into account climate change. North Korea's nuclear weapons program made remarkable progress. And then there's the hyperbolic rhetoric and provocative actions by both sides, the U.S. and North Korea, have increased the possibility of nuclear war by accident or miscalculation. The U.S. and Russia have remained at odds, continuing military exercises along the borders of NATO, undermining the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, upgrading their nuclear arsenals, and eschewing arms control negotiations. Tensions over the South China Sea have increased, with relations between U.S. and China insufficient to reestablish a stable security situation. Pakistan and India have continued to build ever larger arsenals of nuclear weapons. And in the Middle East, uncertainty about continued U.S. support for the landmark Iranian nuclear deal adds a bleak overall picture. And then it goes into climate change, technology change, disrupting democracies around the world, information technologies, using them as weapons, which creates instability in politics and in society. Also, a breakdown in international order that has been dangerously exacerbated by U.S. actions. They backed away from the Paris Climate Accords, of course. International diplomacy has been reduced to name calling, so they're including all these as factors. An urgent warning of global danger. The Science and Security Board of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists hopes this resetting of the clock will be interpreted exactly as it is meant, as an urgent warning of global danger. The time for world leaders to address looming nuclear danger and the continuing march of climate change is long past. The time for the citizens of the world to demand such action is now. So there you are. Thebulletin.org is the website. And it goes on and on.
Optimus.
And, well,
nuclear paranoia, I think, is a really important issue because I think it persists in our culture. But my generation, of course, doesn't know where this feeling that, there's no point, we could all die at any minute, blah, 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 that attitude, which I think makes our culture so glib and so unconcerned with, what's going on around them, because what would it matter if you're could potentially die and on 15 minutes' notice. That nuclear paranoia was a real thing for earlier generations. I mean, do either of you have memories of, this idea of a building up of idea of the Russians could attack us or we would attack them?
I remember MAD, mutually assured destruction.
Sure.
And that's sort of moderated it. If one side, they both could destroy each other, so it'd be impossible to use it at all.
Well, so now the danger is more that we have
smaller
tactical nuclear
exactly.
weapons.
Thanks, Obama.
And apparently, I have an article here, U.S. stealth bombers in Guam, lovely Guam, appear to be readying for a tactical nuclear strike on North Korea. They've got these lovely little free-fall bombs that are, supposedly surgical strike weapons, and they are delivered by stealth bombers, and they're apparently stocking Guam up for that. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing is just like, look, you have a neighbor, Stephen, and your neighbor has a gun pointed at you. Whenever you go outside, you see this guy pointing a gun at you. And so your answer is, okay, well, I'm going to have a gun, and I'm going to point at him. And so neither of us will shoot.
I'm actually thinking about it.
You're actually thinking about it. And someone gets Stephen a gun. And this, so mutually assured destruction is the idea that neither of you is going to shoot at each other because you both know that you have the gun. The problem is that with that as a solution is it doesn't allow for a lessening of those tensions. Nobody can ever put down their gun. Right. You have to be in this state of constant sort of standing right next to destruction all the time and threatening the other all the time in order for that to work. So it creates a kind of stability, but it also means that, in terms of some kind of positive vision of maybe you talk to your neighbor and he puts down the gun and you put down the gun, that kind of doesn't fit into that.
Well, there have been programs to reduce the number of.
We reached the maximum of warheads was in mid-'80s, and it's been going down ever since then. South Africa did away completely with their nuclear thing.
My question is, why do we need 6,000 of them?
Israel, of course, has them. And
I'm told by someone who's interested in the state of Israel and maybe has relatives there that the Israeli nukes are not pointed at Iran or Syria or Lebanon. They're pointed at Saudi oil fields. That's their insurance policy.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, Israel's never acknowledged that they have nuclear weapons. The scientists that revealed that Israel had nuclear weapons is still in prison in Israel, and they threw away the key on that guy. But it is common knowledge that Israel has nuclear weapons.
Here we are. The authors of the Bulletin estimate that as of mid-2017, last year, there are nearly 15,000 nuclear weapons in the world, located at some 107 sites in 14 countries. I think there's 9 actual nuclear powers, but of course the Europeans kind of share the NATO nukes. Roughly 9,400 of these weapons are in military arsenals. The remaining weapons are retired and awaiting dismantlement. Nearly 4,000 are operationally available, and some 1,800 are on high alert and ready for use on short notice.
Well, it drives the logic of every conflict in the world. If Saddam Hussein or Muammar Gaddafi had a nuclear weapon pointed at Israel or Europe, they would still be alive and well.
Well, that's North Korea's thinking, right?
Oh, of course, and they're absolutely right. I mean, and that's why the Americans get so angry if anybody else is going to get a nuclear weapon, because they know that it's a check against the Americans, our ability to change their regime or tell them what to do, or invade them if we want, or bomb them if we want. If you have the nuclear weapon, then America can't attack your country. And so if I was Iran or the Iranian government, I would be doing everything I could to build a nuclear weapon, especially with all these clowns running around saying, let's attack Iran next, or let's attack this country, that country. You better believe you want nuclear weapons. So
I think the big scare, though, is they, and forgive me for using these words, falling into the wrong hands.
There's only one country on Earth. There's only one country on Earth that's used nuclear weapons.
actually against people.
So falling into the wrong hands, they did in August of 1945. They fell into the wrong hands. The Americans.
It concerns me, though, that Pakistan has these things. That government is on the edge as it is.
Totally unstable, and I would agree with you that it's terrifying. And I think that America has the opportunity to lead the way in terms of getting rid of nuclear weapons and reduce it. Bush opposed this idea of, having treaties to limit their development, to limit testing, to do all those things. They thought, well, we're the most powerful country, so we should, the Soviet Union's gone, and the successor Russian state isn't strong enough to oppose us, so we don't want to have any of these treaties anymore. And then Obama announced his intention to invest $1 trillion over 30 years in updating our nuclear arsenal. So America could take a lead on this. We don't. And not only do we not take a lead, we push things in the other direction.
Yeah, well, especially now. We're certainly not engaged in negotiations with Russia about it. And, we're looking to upgrade, as we talked a couple of weeks ago, about hypersonic
I think it's necessary.
Weapons.
Why is this?
They degrade over time.
Defense Department has
they become useless over time. So you need to constantly. We need to constantly renew these things.
Well, you could never use them. The philosopher, and Paul Raphael loves philosophers, in reference to philosophers, Ivan Illich, was a part of the opposition to nuclear weapons, but his protest was a strange one. He just went and stood in the square, I think in Bremen probably, and said nothing. He just stood there in silence because he said to even debate how nuclear weapons ought to be used or stored or not used, he said, would be like saying, well, we should just build concentration camps. Not that we want to use these concentration camps, but in case of a conflict, we might need to exterminate a large part of the population, and so we should have them. But he was also a great critic of the Catholic Church, and he was a Catholic priest, saying that back in the 50s that the Catholic Church has lots to say about birth control, but is curiously silent about nuclear weapons. And so, it's a terrifying debate, and it makes the world a very scary place.
And as we say, it's getting more terrifying because they're making weapons that aren't just these big blockbuster, multi-megaton intercontinental ballistic missiles anymore. They're these. We all think now that we can do little surgical strikes with a tiny little tactical nuclear. We'll just blow up a bunker here and there. But
we're focusing on nuclear weapons because this Journal of Scientists are scientists.
That's
but
how it started.
Actually, when you talk about doom, I think nuclear weapons are probably the least of our worry when it comes to doom.
Cholesterol,
environmental, for example.
Sure.
Yeah, well, that's why they're taking it into account now. It's not just the nuclear technology anymore.
But I think it's related to how we think about climate change, which is nobody can escape the fallout, right? Nobody can escape the fallout of nuclear, winter, and nobody can escape climate change either. I think we should think about that as very, very positive because it means that we are all united against it. That's right, so it has a way of most things fall on class lines. Poor people were worried about environmental degradation because it was localized. It was their job as a miner. It was in their part of town where the pollution was, etc. Not true of climate change and not true of nuclear war. There's no place for the rich to run and escape, not even West Marin. But this is, in theory, a call-in show, 663-8492. Give us a call.
Let us know how you're feeling about the 2 minutes to midnight, the closest it's been since 1953. And they do say this is a dangerous time, but the danger is of our own making. Humankind has invented the implements of apocalypse, so it can invent the methods of controlling and eventually eliminating them. This year, leaders and citizens of the world can move the Doomsday Clock and the world away from the metaphorical midnight of global catastrophe by taking some common-sense actions, like refraining from provocative rhetoric regarding other nuclear powers, like North Korea, sitting down, open multiple channels of communication, abiding by the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action for Iran's nuclear program.
Well, I think
adopt measures to prevent peacetime military incidents along NATO's borders.
Well, I think
all those things.
The whole thing with America is projection. In the 1890s, we all got on board with good old Teddy Roosevelt, and we're going to have an American empire, and it's been the catastrophe for the human race ever since. And because Stalin and Mao and Hitler, make us look good, we just don't think that we have any part to play in the hideousness of the present condition. But this idea of empire is an American projection. I don't think Kim Jong-un wants to conquer South Korea or China or any other place. I think he wants his insurance policy against the United States or China attacking him. I don't think the Iranians have any desire to invade any place. I don't think Saddam Hussein or Muammar Gaddafi were really behind any meaningful attempt to disrupt or destroy, other people's cultures and say, well, but they were behind terrorism. Well, maybe not. If you go back and look at all the things that Gaddafi accepted responsibility for, it may transpire that he was actually accepting responsibility for them to enhance his own prestige, to enhance his own power, even though he may have had nothing to do with them. A lot of people think that those terrorist attacks in Lebanon, Pan Am flight famously, were the Syrian regime, but we didn't want to have the Syrians be responsible for it, so Gaddafi set up and said, it was me. But I don't think any of those countries, and maybe even, let me say the most provocative thing, of Wade Holland, not attentive enough on proofreading this week, Wade, but you did work at the RAND Corporation studying Soviet computer technology, so I'd like you to call in and disagree with me, 663-8492. I don't think the Russians had imperial ambitions, not the way that the Americans painted it.
But isn't Un exporting nuclear technology? I think that's one of the reasons that he's so dangerous is that he is
Kim Jong-un is trying to give other people nuclear weapons.
Yeah, exactly. Give them the technology to build their own.
Sure. And that's what happened with Pakistan, right? Somebody took the thing. Oh, look at this. We have a caller.
Hello, caller. You're on the air. What's your name, please? And please remember to keep it clean and turn your radio down. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Ingrid.
A Nordic name.
Sounds
Nordic
like
name.
the beginning of a song.
You must be a Christian princess from Denmark with a name like Ingrid.
Yes, I'm a Christian princess from Denmark. And so when we were in school, a long time ago, we learned that we should be prepared to crawl under our desks, if in the case of a nuclear attack, as if that was somehow going to protect us. So I want to know what's the current advice on supposing we lob a nuclear bomb at North Korea and they lob one back right at San Francisco. What are people supposed to do? What's going on? What's the current info?
Well, the housing market will change. It'll be easier to find a rental.
I would say food would probably be the best thing. Have your last meal.
Yes.
Do they talk about this in the disaster preparedness meetings?
Well, they should, I think. Don't you think they should?
The last disaster preparedness meeting I went, Malcolm made lovely brownies, and I just want to say thank you, Malcolm. Those brownies were delicious. And then
here we are. Here's an article. Here's what to do if a nuclear bomb is dropped near you.
Ingrid, did it make you self-assured? Were you happier knowing that? Did it make you calmer?
I was 6 years old.
Oh, okay.
I pretty much ignored the whole idea. It was kind of fun crawling under the desk.
Did you ever hear your parents talk about it? Did you have? Can you remember conversations?
Been through a war at that point.
Yeah.
So they didn't talk about things like that?
They were very anti-war in general.
Right.
The first thing to do is immediately take cover. That has not changed.
Is that really going to help you?
Well, if you're not in the immediate blast zone, apparently, because the heat of the blast compares to the temperature inside the core of the sun. There's a heat pulse, and of course there's the electromagnetic pulse. Oh, which is another reason that they might use nuclear weapons is because you fire one up in the atmosphere and it creates an electromagnetic pulse that wipes out everything that we have here. All cars will stop. All computers will. Anyway, take cover. When it comes to finding the best place to take shelter, Lawrence Livermore National Lab researcher Michael Dillon recommends hiding in a building with the most dense material possible. So, bunker. Yes.
So are people still building bomb shelters? Are there still bomb shelters? Are there bomb shelters in our community?
There are. In our community.
I think people are still building them. I'll tell you this. When I was doing work for the city of San Francisco, there are shelters all over the city of San Francisco, but they're kind of a sort of a hodgepodge of basements and commercial buildings and stuff like that.
There are some very upscale
bunkers. Yeah, this is very fashionable.
That's
now.
a new fashion.
All the survivors.
A bunker you can love.
But this is the crazy thing. I heard this is on KQED, which is trying to raise money right now. And I just want to say to our listeners, don't give KQED any money. Give it to KWMR.
Thank you very much.
But, they do this thing. It's like a pledge gift or something like that, which is like your survival bucket. I love the survival bucket. You can cook in it. You can wash in it. You can poop in it.
Well, yeah, you keep it in your bunker.
Well, that's it. It's like all of this like dried food and stuff. So the Americans' fear of something terrible happening is so extreme that NPR, which just caters to rich ninnies who don't care about anything really, is selling survival buckets.
Jim Bakker, have you ever seen his?
Who's Jim Bakker?
He was out of prison. Jim and Tammy Bakker. Baker. I thought it was Bakker. Oh, okay.
It's
the Bakers. Excuse me.
It's Hurwitz.
Yeah,
is how it's pronounced.
The Bakers. They've got a whole setup with big buckets of
God's own bunker.
God's own
big
bunker.
Buckets of food.
Well, yeah, but that's I have to say I have an airtight barrel full of grains and beans for when something happens, because they say 3 days. Well, 3 days in West Marin, 3 days. No, it's going to be a week, and you need to eat.
So what about local bunkers? Come on, we're up.
Local bunkers.
I have several
Anybody
local
know
bunkers.
of local bunkers?
Yes, Marshall Siegel's Wine Room is one of my local bunkers. Let's see, I have other local bunkers. Let's see,
wine cellar would be great.
Ken and Kelly Dunay's freezer, where all of the emergency lamb is held. Yes, we have several cellars.
So here's a graphic from FEMA. A one-story wood frame house with a basement. You would have a dose reduction factor of 10, so you would receive 1/10 of the dose of a person in the open of radioactivity. If it's brick, veneer, or concrete, then it goes up to between 20 to 50. If it's a 5-story building and you're in a basement, a double level basement, lower basement, 200, etc. So a basement of a large apartment building you would have 200, 1/200th of a dose of radioactivity. There you go.
I haven't seen a basement for a long time.
Yeah, right. I know.
Midwest.
Yeah, we have a lot of basements because it freezes. It doesn't freeze out here.
Once in a shelter, wash off any debris that may be on your skin or clothes. If possible, put your clothes in a plastic bag, seal it up to keep the radioactive material from spreading.
But this is sort of risible, right?
Wash your hair with shampoo and wash your doggies, because
wash your dog.
You're covered in.
In case of nuclear attack, wash your dog. I think the really negative thing about this to me is that it's the dark side of American individualism. This post-war individualism we all love. We all love the way in which we feel like individuals now. We didn't in the past. But the dark side of it is that we don't think of ourselves as being a part of a collective that should do things to make the world a better place. That's just off the table. And part of it is nuclear paranoia. Part of it's, well, why do you want to do something that's going to take us 5 years or 10 years, Charles, to achieve when we might die in 15 minutes? So please pass the cheese. I would like some nice cheese and not hear about what we might do in 5 years.
By the way, there's I have to do it. This is KWMR 90.5 Point Reyes
Farmstead cheese.
And here we are. This is a wonderful thing to read right now. The 2018 Geography of Hope Conference, Finding Resilience in Nature in Perilous Times. See? Perfect. March 17th and 18th in Point Reyes Station, featuring Roo Map of Outdoor Afro, Winnemem Wintu Tribal Chief, Kayleen Sisk, and authors Peter Wallaben and Peter Forbes, plus art curated by Isis Hokanos. Tickets at gohconference.org. And we're also supported by West Marin Rotary, a leadership organization supporting community projects locally and worldwide. Meetings are at 8 a.m. on Wednesdays at 11250 Highway 1 in downtown Point Reyes Station, next to the Rotary Peace Garden. Online at westmarinrotary.org. Information about international projects online at Rotary.org. www.whistlestop.org. And we're also supported by Whistle Stop, providing support and transportation services for older adults and people living with disabilities in Marin County. Whistle Stop's Active Aging Center provides meals, classes, multicultural gatherings, information, and referral services. Online at whistlestop.org. What are you doing?
Miss Noise, there's some noise in the background. Well, hold on a second here. What are we having for lunch? Anyway,
But there's also I just wanted to say there's a wonderful website, and if you just Google Nuke Map, you'll find an interactive map that shows you what the blast will be and where the fallout will go. And depending on how big a bomb it is, you can choose the size of the bomb and whether it's air-based or ground-based. And it's a wonderful graphic.
You know, back in the 50s, I remember on the beach, for example, there were a number.
1850s?
There were a number of films that came out on these very subjects. I just can't remember.
Do you remember the Failsafe and Dr. Strangelove and
on the beach?
On the beach. But do you remember the Johnson attack ad on Goldwater in '64? Do you remember seeing that on TV?
No.
I don't know if it played what markets it played in, but famously a girl plucking petals of a daisy and then a nuclear explosion. You vote for Goldwater and you'll get a nuclear.
And let's not forget Planet of the Apes. That whole series is predicated on the
maniacs.
fact that you maniacs
you blew it up. Planet of the Apes, what a fine performance. Oh, a quick plug. Norman Solomon, who's supposed to call in. Norman, if you're out there, do call in. He is going to be speaking tonight in San Francisco at the Unitarian Universalist Center, the Thomas Starr King Room, at 6:30 p.m. tonight. And he's speaking on, what people who are interested in progressive politics and the Democratic Party, what they should do and where they should go from here. He's, I think, the keynote with a couple of other speakers. Rose Aguilar is the moderator, and Karen Bernal is the other speaker. But so Norman is our neighbor out here. So if you're in San Francisco, go to the Unitarian Universalist Church tonight at 6:30, and you can hear him speak. Also, Dick Aston died, and I like Dick, and we worked on volunteer projects, by which I do not mean fundraisers. I mean actual volunteer projects. And he was a lovely man, and I'm sorry that he's passed away. Anyhow, sorry.
I'm sorry to hear that. So there are a few little bright spots that they mentioned in their in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists this morning in their little press junket. Non-nuclear nations wrote a nuclear weapons ban treaty because they just wanted show that they do not intend to get nuclear weapons. They don't want anybody else to have them, and why can't we get rid of them all? Of course, bad news is nuclear powers have disavowed it. Nikki Haley said U.S. will never, ever sign it. But it's a symbolic victory for nuclear powers, but in future they may be discouraged by non-participation and bad faith on the part of nuclear powers. So that could be a problem. The U.S. pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords, but nobody else did. That's a little piece of good news. What else good news? We're already suffering the consequences of climate change, but we do still have options that can start immediately and won't be necessarily financially devastating. So they're trying to look on the bright side, even though they moved the hand just a little bit closer.
Well, but, I mean, just look at how it works in a country like the United Kingdom, England, right? They and the liberal elites that dominate the media and politics in England, you would think would be very, very against war and nuclear weapons and things like that. But when they proposed getting rid of these nuclear submarines, Trident, so-called. Everybody, including the Manchester Guardian, which is supposed to be the voice of liberal Britons, lines up and says that the leader of the Labour Party is weak because he's not going to spend billions of dollars to update this nuclear submarine fleet. And there are cruise missiles all over the United Kingdom. The United States has basically dictated to the English what their defense policy is going going to be since the war and has put nuclear weapons all over that country. And when somebody says, no, this is a bad idea, we should get rid of them, everybody lines up to say, including, like I say, The Guardian, that this is weakness and we can't do that and blah, 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 blah. So it's funny, you see how, people's attitudes are, what they really are on questions like this. I think ultimately people want security over any kind of positive vision of where, humanity might go. They could care less. They want their comfort. They want their security. They want their cheese.
Interesting cheeses.
Exactly.
So to Ingrid's question, thank you, Ingrid, for calling. And Cold War bomb shelter maker is making a comeback. On page 27 of the March 2018 issue of Fine Home Building magazine is an ad from Atlas Survival Shelters for the latest in prefabricated personal bomb shelters, something we have never seen in that publication before. 5 sizes available, from $10,000 to $19,000, and proudly made in the U.S.A. There you go.
Do we know who has a shelter? Well, we know one person has a shelter.
They mentioned square
how
footage?
big are they? Let me see. You carry on.
Do you have any? Do you have any awareness of a bomb shelter, a personal sort of one of these bunkers
is there
in West
one here?
I can think of one up in Mendocino, and Paul will know who I'm thinking of. But what about out here? Have I ever seen one of those? No, I haven't. What about you, Stephen? Any?
No, I have none. But
Yeah.
I think that we should have
Grandy
community bomb shelters.
Community bomb. The basement of the Grandy building.
Well, this basement of, you take your kids and you're down there with no connection to the outside world.
This is a terrifying scenario. The living would envy the dead to have to be trapped in a room with their children. Is that what you're telling me? No. Because I accept that. No, I don't know. I mean, I think it's all pretty crazy. But like I say, the hangover of nuclear paranoia is still with us. And the most dangerous thing about it is it's like fear of missing out, or you only live once. These Twitter hashtag, I think it's Twitter, maybe it's Instagram. I don't know what it is. It's this YOLO and FOMO thing. Is kind of like the way in which nuclear paranoia lives in the mind of somebody who was born in 1985 or 1995. It's this, devil may care thing, very glib, very, sort of reckless. And I think it is a lineal descendant of the way in which people felt about the world after the bomb, right? What's the point of building anything? It could all end tomorrow.
Yeah, what's the point of doing anything? It could all end tomorrow. So there's various models. Some of them are made from galvanized corrugated pipe, like
that'll rust in 2 weeks in Marshall. That's not going to work.
So you bury them 10 feet deep. There's a concrete dome, monolithic concrete domes that they pour on site. Watertight smooth steel, hardened concrete bunkers, deep earth bunkers.
It's really absurd. I mean, survivalism.
8x40 is one size. I mean, they're
8x40,
all kinds of
that's
different
my place,
sizes.
basically.
There's multi-family ones, single-family survival shelters. Yeah.
Well, survivalism is absurd, right? It's no way of thinking about life at all if this kind of catastrophe happens. And I have to say, the nice reflection. Transition Point Rays, I think is what they were called, talked about making a map of where all the food is in West Marin if we're cut off from the rest of the world. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And one Paul Fenn, formerly of Marshall, California, pointed out that in such a scenario, the people are going to come out of the city, strap us to their bumpers, and drive us into a wall. And that's true. There is no, you say, I've got all my guns, and there are people, you talk to like some of the rancher people.
You're talking about, I mean, this show is all about, doom and gloom and the apocalypse. But that can hold true, where are caches of food, where are generators in a community like Marshall. Wouldn't you want to know where that is?
Oh,
if the roads are blocked and
Yes, but I mean, this is a catastrophe that never comes, and people prepare for it, and they have walkie-talkies, and they blah blah. And I was given one of these walkie-talkies, and technically, I'm talking about myself.
We're seeing those kind of catastrophes, though. I mean, Puerto Rico, in terms of being cut. I mean, that's not nuclear weapons, but it's a good example
Wouldn't
of what
you want to
happens
know
when
if your
people are cut
neighbor
off
had
from each
a
other.
generator or if he had food he could share?
Well, this is the problem. I mean, that we would all die of gout. I don't know if there's ever been a fatal case of gout, but we would have it because there is lots of food in West Marin, but it's beef and lamb and ice cream and cheese. And
you do as I do, and you have a stash. If anyone wants to know, I have a stash of grains and legumes and
join me in
rice,
going getting those delicious loin chops. Don't want his rice and beans. And we'd have
There you go.
wine, delicious wine.
It just makes sense because things do happen, and with climate change, nastier things are going to start happening.
It does make sense. Earthquakes are more the...
To be able to just live comfortably for a week if you have to, why not? Firewood, why not?
What do you do after that week? Right?
Well, then we're not talking about necessarily the apocalypse, right?
Right.
I'm just talking about when things break down. There's 3 days of food in every supermarket. That's where that 3-day thing comes from.
Well, I think the psychological impact is important, and I'll quote Slavoj Žižek, who said, everybody can imagine Hollywood makes all these movies about the apocalypse, whether it's environmental, religious, a meteor strikes the earth, a nuclear weapon, this, that, the other thing. But nobody can imagine capitalism changing a little bit. And this, to me, is the problem with nuclear paranoia and the whole debate is that these threats are real, and you can understand why they command people's attention when you think about them. It makes sense to think about these kind of catastrophic things that can happen. But what it does is it interrupts.
Change at all. I think the momentum is so strong when you talk about nobody imagines capitalist change. I just think the change in particular, I think the momentum is so strong already that...
momentum for what?
For the destruction of the world.
Oh, I see.
Oh. Well,
that it doesn't matter.
The atomic scientists would agree with it.
The destruction of society that we know it, and that we can imagine it. The people that are going to be, I think, ready are the people in Africa, for example, who've always lived who've made peace with a certain level. That we don't know how to do. I mean, we'd be completely.
But we do idealize it.
novices.
Yeah, but we do idealize it. That subsistence way of life is the thing that privileged people idealize now, right? They want to have their farms. They want to have their gardens. They want to do rainwater catchment. They want to know how to build things. They want to, So it is something. We've gone so far away from subsistence, being able to take care of ourselves, right, and have some autonomy and some freedom, and so far into life as systems that need to be managed, biological systems, institutions, whatever. But people do want to come out on the other side of that. I mean, people are trying to. I mean, we do it in a kind of Disneyland way out here. We do it in a sort of fancy catalog way here in West Marin, but you can see the impulse, which is I want to grow my own veggies, I want to raise my own animals, I want to build my own house, and so. And
of course, on the other hand, that has nothing to do with the subject really, although they would make great targets. By 2100, at least 10 cities are predicted to have populations over 50 million.
And they'll be underwater?
Shanghai is 50 million Aquaman.
Well, Shanghai. There'll be mega cities coming because there are already more people in cities than there are on the land, so to speak. And, of course, cities are built on good farming land, as we know.
Oh, Petaluma, look at that. Yeah. But, no, I mean, so I think there are things to be positive about, but it's very easy to fall into this, nothing really matters. What does nothing really matters mean? I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing.
Well, I think you should keep the patient comfortable.
And you are the patient?
But then that's a counter argument to what you were just saying about survivalism. Those are people who say, I want to keep doing what I'm doing.
No, I don't think so.
Drops.
Well, because think about survivalism in terms of the person who says, I got my guns. Well, how many bullets do you have? Right. If civilization collapses, I can guarantee you don't have enough bullets. Eventually somebody's going to come and steal your can of beans and your gold.
You're focusing on material, though. I think the culture and community are probably more important in terms of survival. We're going to have to live together if you're talking about that level, and I think that's community and culture are probably the most important from my mind.
I'd love it if we had community and culture.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'd love it if we had community and culture. That would be something worth defending. But sadly, we don't have either. I mean, we already live in an atomized society, and we already live in this weird post-apocalyptic nightmare taken from a certain angle. If you read, for instance, Cormac McCarthy's The Road, I always read things very literally. I know, it's terrifying. It was awful. But I read it really literally. I think he's actually writing about this post-apocalyptic, post-nuclear nightmare that, this nuclear winter that the characters are living in, where they're cannibals and, just any kind of hideousness you can imagine. I always have to have, my smart arty friends explain to me what these things are, because I always just read them literally, like the art movie. I'm like, and then they say, no, the gorilla is actually the symbol of the mother, and that cat was supposed to be Henry VIII. And, I was like, I had no idea. I thought it was a gorilla and a cat. But The Road, I think, is just a description of contemporary life.
I can't even, just mentioning the title.
I haven't seen this.
Shivers.
The sequel's pretty bad. It's the Marshall Petaluma Road. It's a scary one.
Which, by the way, is going to get fixed this winter.
Positive news.
During the winter.
But I think he's just, Cormac McCarthy saying, this is the way people actually treat each other. We do live in this world in which people are trying to cannibalize each other. They're trying to it's a utilitarian world in which every person has a use, and people are trying to use each other to get what they want. And so, I think we already live in a very scary, atomized society. On the surface, there is a certain veneer of you say culture or community. I don't think it runs very deep. I think
that's where we differ, because
Paul's a nice guy. And
I say that humans are animals who like to be in collectives. They like to be in community. They thrive on living together with others.
So how do you explain us?
Well, we think we are. We think we're
perverts.
We think we are doing that. We're also Americans who have this, the lone wolf thing that has been drilled into everybody. But no, I think we all think we
want it desperately. I don't think we have it. I think when we get together, this is group loneliness. And I think what we call society now is merely organized misanthropy. It's about people using other people to get stuff.
I think, Paul, you should give him more of a chance to describe the positive side. That isn't given enough attention. It's so easy to talk about the downside.
Humans are capable of many wonderful things, but unfortunately, most of the wonderful things we do are just for our own benefit and don't necessarily make the planet a better place to live on. But here's a positive thing. Instead of talking about Armageddon, how about just talking about the suitcase bomb? So.
Well, let me just quote Dennis Potter's brilliant singing detective. I believe in the one thing that can come out of humans' mouths: vomit. Anyway, so Armitage Shanks, what are we positive?
No wonder nobody calls in.
Nuclear material security.
We have one caller.
Nuclear material security. The categories here are stolen, lost. This is all about nuclear material, byproducts and weapons-grade plutonium, apparently. Stolen, lost, delivery failure, contaminated material, unauthorized possession, improper disposal, and other, whatever that would mean. And in the U.S., 170 incidents of that in between 2010 and 2016. In just 6 years, 170 incidents of nuclear material basically going missing.
Yikes.
Let's see, Mexico, 4, and Canada, 16, 19 in France, because these are the countries that have nuclear power plants, and they have this material that they're what nuclear power plants were originally built for, which was to enable weapons-grade plutonium to be produced.
That is where the material from the enriched material from the British nuclear power plants went. It went to build American bombs. And, by the way, the British government was not even informed of this. Clement Attlee, when he started the British nuclear weapons project, didn't even tell the cabinet, didn't even tell his own long political allies who he was in government with. It was a secret deal that he did with the Americans. So that is terrifying. The other thing about the dirty bomb is that all I've ever seen about a dirty bomb is that the fear that it was efficacious in some way is the power of the dirty bomb. The actual idea that you take radioactive material and you blow it up in some public space is supposedly from what I've seen and heard, not dangerous at all. The studies that
it's terrorism.
Well, it is, but the terrorism is the fear of the dirty bomb.
Yeah.
Not they said when they said about the negative health impacts of it, they took an example of if everybody directly exposed at the time of the explosion stood in the same place for a year. Mm-hmm. This was the baseline that they were using, or the example they were using for how dangerous this radioactive material would be. Mm-hmm. But so it isn't, again, the power of the dirty bomb. And this is very this is very, I would say, postmodern, but this is very much the world we live in. It's the fear of the power of the dirty bomb.
Yeah.
It's not the thing itself, but
and there are far more efficient ways of doing things, like with ricin or with biological.
Look at the water.
They have conventional weapons. They
Conventional
actually
weapons,
dropped one, the mother of all bombs.
Well, but I mean, look at how
it has a mushroom cloud. It's
good old TNT.
Same kind of destructive capabilities. It just isn't nuclear, so we don't mess around.
Well, sure, but if you wanted to poison the water supply of a major city, it'd be very easy to do.
Yes, absolutely.
There's just these huge reservoirs that sit outside of all major cities, and they have, since 9/11, they've got guys with big bellies and goatees on ATVs riding around them with 90 zillion guns on them. But I think it would be very easy to be a terrorist if you wanted to be.
I love that mother of all. That's like sort of like drinking the Kool-Aid, the mother of all bombs. This was Saddam Hussein.
Oh, was the mother of all?
He's the one that coined that phrase.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, the mother of all...
Whatever it was.
Something
else, I can't
else,
even remember,
right?
but it was the mother of all.
I didn't know that.
Mother of all wars. Or
and
something.
he was had a tremendous singing voice, which I think is a neglected fact about Saddam Hussein.
So let's end on a bright note.
That was a bright note.
Back in 1986, there was 64,500 warheads in the world, nuclear warheads. 64,500. Right now, it's still going. It's kind of staying about the same as it was.
Positive note?
It's gone down since the 2015. 9,435 now.
Progress.
It's progress. It's not great, but it's progress from 64,500 to 9,500.
The question is, how many are decaying?
Well, yeah.
That's
how
why
many?
we have to keep
how many are? Who knows where? Because they've been misplaced. Oh, oops. Where did that go? Anyway, thank you for listening, and thank you for calling, Ingrid. KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Charles. I'm Paul Raffel. This was Let's Talk.